What if the past was never meant to be carried? Not forgotten, not denied, but simply set down. Think about it. How much of your day is shaped by things that aren't actually happening anymore? A conversation from months ago still lingering in your mind. A moment from childhood you keep trying to make sense of. The regret of a decision that reruns in your head like a scene in a movie. One you keep hoping will end differently. We all do it. We carry around these echoes, memories wrapped in emotion, stories built from hurt, fear, or loss. They become part of our inner landscape. But here's the paradox. They're not real anymore. Alan Watts said it simply. The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. As the proverb says, tomorrow never comes. And the same is true for the past. It's gone, irrevocably gone. But we don't treat it like that. We treat the past like a place we live in, like a room we go back to over and over again, decorating it with fresh details, re-experiencing old feelings, adding new judgments, rewriting scenes with hindsight. But no matter how many times you go back, you can't interact with the past. You can't touch it. You can't walk through it. You can't change it. All you can do is remember it. And memory is not truth. It's not reality. It's not even consistent. It's a mental process, a construction based on fragments and feelings. And yet, how often do we treat our memories like gospel? How often do we say things like, oh, I'll never get over that. I can't forgive what happened. I wish I could go back and do it differently. These statements seem harmless, even noble at times, but they do something subtle and dangerous. They anchor our identity to something that no longer exists. They trap us in a story written by our most painful moments. And then we wonder why we can't grow, why we can't change, why we feel stuck. It's because we're trying to move forward while staring backward. You can't do both. Alan Watts once spoke of the absurdity of how we try to live life backwards, carrying everything behind us while trying to march into the unknown. He said, no valid plans for the future can be made by those who have no capacity for living now. Think about that. Your ability to create what's next is directly tied to your ability to be present. And your ability to be present is blocked every time you keep reaching into the past for answers, for meaning, for safety. But the past won't give you that. It has no new information, only repeated loops. So what are you really doing when you revisit the past? Often it's not for understanding, it's for protection. We believe that if we hold on to what happened, we'll be better prepared next time, that remembering every detail will somehow ensure it never happens again. That suffering equals safety. But it doesn't. It just exhausts you, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And here's the real trap. We confuse vigilance with wisdom, pain with purpose, memory with identity. And so we keep the wound open, not because we want to suffer, but because we think we need to honour what we went through, to never forget, to be ready for anything. But there's a quiet truth underneath all that. You're allowed to put it down. You're allowed to let the story fade, not because it didn't matter, but because it already did. You already learned what you needed to learn. You already survived it. You already felt it. The experience is over. What continues is the attachment. An attachment is a choice, usually unconscious, but still a choice. Letting go isn't about forgetting. It's not about pretending it didn't shape you. It's about recognizing that it's no longer happening. And if it's no longer happening, why keep living like it is? Alan Watts would ask you to return to this moment, to realize that the only real thing in your entire life is now. This breath, this sensation, this heartbeat. Everything else is either memory or imagination. And you are the space in which those thoughts arise, not the thoughts themselves. You are not what happened to you. You are the awareness of what happened. You are not your pain. You are the presence that witnessed the pain. So what if you let yourself come back to that? Not just once, not just during meditation, but again and again, as a practice, as a way of living. What if the past was never meant to be carried? What if it was only meant to be experienced and then released? What if your life isn't asking you to solve the past, but to stop dragging it into your present? You can't rewrite what happened, but you can stop rehearsing it. You can begin, right now, to tell a new story. one where you're not the wounded character stuck in a loop, but the author who finally put the pen down and walked away from the page. If letting go of the past is so liberating, then why do we struggle with it so much? Why do we keep circling back to things that made us miserable? Why do we revisit old pain, knowing full well it brings no peace? It's because pain, for many of us, becomes familiar, and the familiar, no matter how dysfunctional, feels safer than the unknown. Alan Watts once said, "We cannot be more sensitive to pleasure without being more sensitive to pain." But I'd take it a step further. We often become attached to pain because we think it's part of who we are. There's something deeply seductive about our suffering. It gives us a narrative. It gives us something to point to when life doesn't go our way. I act this way because of what happened to me. I sabotage my relationships because of how I was raised. I never take risks because I've failed before. On the surface, these sound like explanations, but dig deeper, and you'll see they're just identities in disguise. We start to wear our wounds like name tags. We bond over trauma. We call ourselves broken, thinking it makes us more real, more human, more relatable. But eventually, it becomes a cage. The story we use to explain ourselves becomes the story that limits us. And here's the hard part. Most of us don't want to admit that we've built our personality around pain. Because what happens if we let it go? Who are you without your trauma? Who are you without the betrayal? Who are you if you stop being the one who was wronged? These are terrifying questions, because they threaten the ego, the mental structure you've built to navigate life. And the ego wants one thing above all else: to survive, even if that means staying stuck, even if that means replaying old movies just to remember the pain. Because pain equals proof. Proof that it was real. Proof that you were hurt. Proof that you have a reason to be guarded, cautious, jaded, or numb. But you don't need pain to prove that something happened. And you don't need to keep it alive to learn from it. Think about it like this. If you burn your hand on a stove, do you need to keep your hand on the burner to remember it was hot? The lesson is in the experience, not in the chronic re-experiencing. But we don't treat emotional wounds like physical ones. We don't let them close. Instead, we pick at them, talk about them, post about them, re-traumatize ourselves in the name of healing. But true healing doesn't look like constant storytelling. It looks like spaciousness, stillness. It looks like not needing to talk about it anymore. Not because it didn't happen, but because it no longer defines you. Alan Watts spoke often about identity and illusion. He said that who we think we are is just a collection of roles, labels, and mental concepts layered on top of one another. And pain is one of those layers. It can become a persona, a costume, a way to belong in a world that worships the wounded and overlooks the quietly whole. But wholeness is not performative. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be explained. It's subtle. It's peaceful. And to reach it, you have to be willing to release what makes you feel interesting in your suffering. You have to stop proving your pain. You have to stop weaponizing your past as a justification for stagnation. You have to stop using your memories as armor against the possibility of joy, because that's what's really at stake here. Joy. You can't experience joy when your hands are full of old grief. You can't receive the present when you're still holding on to the past. And so the work, if we're being honest, is not just about letting go. It's about grieving who you thought you needed to be in order to feel safe. It's about grieving the version of you that was born from survival, not choice. And it's about remembering that familiarity is not the same thing as truth. Just because you felt something for a long time doesn't mean it's still real. Just because a thought has lived in your head for years doesn't mean it's yours to keep. Just because pain feels like home doesn't mean you belong there. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are not the echo of your worst day. You are the one who heard the echo and chose to stop listening. You are the space between what happened and what happens next. You are the awareness that can rewrite the pattern, but only if you stop holding on to the version of yourself that's been shaped by fear. Let it soften, let it unravel, let it be unfamiliar for a while. Because that discomfort, that's freedom in disguise. Here's something most people never learn. Your memories are not snapshots. They're not saved files. They're not stored recordings you access like a security camera. They're stories, and they change every time you tell them. Let that sink in. Every memory you revisit is a reconstruction, not a retrieval. Science backs this up. When you recall a memory, your brain doesn't play back an accurate file. It rebuilds the event, piece by piece, from fragments of sense, emotion, imagination, and bias. It's more like a painting than a photograph. You fill in gaps, you exaggerate certain moments, you mute others, you add commentary, you shift the lighting, you add internal narration. That was the worst day of my life. I was so stupid. They never cared about me. But that's not what happened. That's your current self reinterpreting what your past self experienced. You're not remembering the event. You're remembering the last time you remembered it. Which means your past is alive only in the way you tell it. This is where most people get stuck. They confuse repetition with accuracy. They think that because the story feels vivid, it must be true. But vividness is not the same as truth. Emotion doesn't equal fact, it equals imprint. The stronger the emotional charge, the deeper the neural groove, and the more easily your mind will access that memory loop when something triggers it. This is why pain feels more real than peace. Pain leaves scars in the body. Peace often leaves no trace. And so we return to pain because it gives us something to hold on to. It gives us a storyline. It gives us the illusion of control. If I keep thinking about what happened, I'll understand it. If I stay angry, I won't let them off the hook. If I keep remembering, I'll make sure it never happens again. But this is an illusion, because what you're really doing is rehearsing, not reflecting, not healing, just rehearsing. And what you rehearse becomes your personality. Rehearse fear, and you become cautious. Rehearse betrayal, and you become suspicious. Rehearse failure, and you stop trying. Without realizing it, your story becomes your identity. Your thoughts start speaking for you, and now you're not living from possibility. You're living from a remembered wound. But here's the invitation. If your memory is editable, then so is your future. If the past is a story you keep rewriting, then why not rewrite it consciously? Not with lies, not with denial, but with awareness. Awareness that the version you've been carrying may no longer be helpful. Awareness that the way you've told your story may be more about protection than truth. Awareness that your identity is not bound to an unchanging archive, but is created moment by moment by what you choose to focus on. Alan Watts spoke about this fluid nature of identity often. He said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. You can't pin yourself down. You are not a fixed object. You are not a resume of experiences. You are the one who's aware of those experiences. You are the witness, not the file folder. You are the field of consciousness in which thoughts about the past arise and dissolve. So the next time a painful memory shows up, pause, notice it, feel what it does to your body, the tension, the sadness, the heat. And then ask yourself, is this still true? Or am I just replaying a version of the story I've told so many times, I forgot it was just one version? You don't have to change the memory, you only have to change your relationship to it. Because pain becomes permanent when you start believing it's the whole truth, but it never is. It's a fragment, a scene, a sentence in a chapter you've already finished. You don't owe it anything more, and it no longer has permission to speak on your behalf. So today, consider this. What story are you tired of telling? What memory no longer feels like it belongs to the person you are becoming? What loop are you ready to exit? Because the truth is, you're not trying to get over the past. You're trying to stop building your future from it. And the first step is to recognize that your memories are not anchors, they're invitations. You can thank them for what they taught you. You can bless them for what they revealed. And then you can let them go, like a mist clearing from the surface of a still lake, revealing that all along, the reflection you thought was permanent was just passing through. So far we've talked about stories, about memory, about the ways we carry the past like it still has power over us. But now, I want to take you somewhere else, somewhere closer, somewhere far more real than anything we've spoken about yet. Because there's a truth beneath all the truth, a foundation underneath every realization. And that truth is this: the present moment is the only real place you've ever been. Everything else is thought. Alan Watts called this the eternal now. He spoke about time not as a linear progression, but as a conceptual overlay, something the mind uses to organize experience, not something that actually exists outside of it. Let that land. Time is an idea, and the past, just memory, the future, just imagination. What we call yesterday and tomorrow are mental bookmarks, but you have never experienced anything outside of the present. Even when you recall a memory, you're doing it now. Even when you fear the future, the fear is happening now. This is the paradox of human suffering. We suffer over things that aren't happening. We stress, we ruminate, we fantasize, we dread, all inside the mind. And while our attention drifts endlessly between what was and what might be, we miss what is. This moment, this breath, this body, this heartbeat. So let's pause. Not metaphorically, literally. Right now, take a slow breath in. Hold it gently. Now breathe out, even slower. Do it again. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. Let the breath be the anchor that brings you back to now. Feel the air move through your nostrils. Feel your lungs expand. Feel gravity beneath you. Your body supported. Feel your fingers resting. Feel the space around your eyes. Feel your jaw. Feel your shoulders. Notice where you're holding. And soften. You don't have to fix anything in this moment. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't need to think your way into clarity. You just need to feel. Because the body doesn't live in the past. The body doesn't live in the future. The body lives here. And when you bring your attention to the body, you step into now. You come home. Alan Watts once said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." Most of us try to fix our pain by thinking harder, by solving our suffering like it's a math problem. But your mind can't think its way out of what it thought its way into. The answer isn't more analysis. It's presence, stillness, a return to the real. So I want to invite you into something deeper, a small practice. Right now, no matter where you are, close your eyes if it's safe. And if it's not, just soften your gaze. Let everything else drop away for a few minutes. Feel yourself in this exact moment. You don't need to do anything. Just notice. The sounds in the room, the rhythm of your breathing, the beat of your heart, the subtle movements of life happening in your body without any effort from you. Now imagine this. There is no clock, no calendar, no countdown, no deadlines, no past behind you, no future ahead of you. There is only this inhale, this exhale, this sensation of being. You are not late, you are not early, you are not behind in life, you are not ahead of schedule, you are simply here. You are not the name you've been given, not the role you've played, not the memories you've clung to. You are the awareness beneath all of that, the clear space behind the thoughts, the silent witness that has always been watching, quietly, gently, without judgment. Stay here for just a moment longer. Feel how still it is, how quiet, how unburdened. And now, breathe in again, and slowly, gently come back. Open your eyes, look around. Notice something in your environment. One detail you hadn't seen before. A crack in the wall. The way the light moves across the surface of a table. The sound of distant birds, traffic, or silence. This is what's real. This is what's true. Everything else is mind. And here's the shift that changes everything. The more you return to now, the weaker your past becomes. Because the past requires your attention to survive. It feeds on your focus. But when you stop visiting it, when you stop assigning meaning to every echo, when you stop inviting old stories back in through the door of your awareness. It fades, not because it wasn't real, but because it's no longer relevant. You've outgrown the need to carry it. You've stepped into something deeper, into what's actually here. And now that you're here, what might you do with this moment? Who might you become without the weight? What does life feel like when you're not chasing or running but simply being? That's where we go next. So far we've talked about pain, about memory, about returning to the present. But now we reach the most confronting and maybe the most important part of this process. Letting go of the past also means letting go of the version of you that was built around it. And that's where most people stop. Because if you release the story, you lose the character who lived inside it. You lose the identity that pain gave you. An identity, even a painful one, feels like solid ground in an uncertain world. Alan Watts spoke often about the ego. Not ego in the arrogant, boastful sense, but ego as the self-image, the mental construct we build about who we are based on what we've been through. He said, the ego is nothing other than the focus of conscious attention. In other words, the more you focus on your past, the more your ego builds itself around it. You become the person who was betrayed, the person who failed, the one who was always overlooked, the one who had to be strong. These labels start off as defense mechanisms, but over time, they become walls. And after long enough, those walls become your home. You build relationships inside those walls. You make decisions from inside those walls. You set your expectations based on what you believe you deserve from inside those walls. And then, you forget you're inside them at all. The person you became to survive becomes the person you now believe you are. But here's the problem. You're not that person anymore. That moment is over, but you're still wearing the mask it gave you, still holding the shield, still acting out patterns that don't serve you. Because deep down, some part of you thinks it's safer to stay small, guarded, or angry than to admit you no longer need to be. You've outgrown the wound, but the identity that formed around it hasn't caught up yet. And this is where letting go becomes deeper than emotional release. It becomes ontological, existential. You're not just letting go of a memory, you're letting go of a version of yourself. And that can feel like a death, a soft one, but a death nonetheless. Because you're releasing who you thought you were and stepping into the unknown space of who you might become. That space can feel disorienting at first. You might ask, if I'm not the person who was hurt, then who am I? If I'm not the one who's always anxious, what do I do with my peace? If I'm not broken, what am I supposed to fix? These questions don't have quick answers. They don't need to, because the answer isn't intellectual. It's experiential. It's not a sentence. It's a sensation. It's the quiet feeling of being able to breathe a little deeper, to move without explaining, to sit in your own skin without apology or armor. It's the soft realization that you don't need a story to justify your existence. You can just exist, here, now, without performance, without projection, without dragging your whole life behind you like a rusted chain. But here's the key. This transformation doesn't come from effort. It doesn't come from forcing. It comes from surrender, from saying, I don't need to be who I was. I don't owe anyone a version of me that's no longer real. I am willing to be new. That takes courage, and it takes compassion, especially for the part of you that's afraid, because your ego will resist. It will tell you you're being unrealistic, that change this deep isn't safe, that letting go is naive, that holding on is protection. But protection from what? From life? From feeling? From freedom? Alan Watts warned against clinging to the illusion of security. He said, to have faith is to trust yourself to the water. When you swim, you don't grab hold of the water, because if you do, you will sink and drown. Instead, you relax and float. Letting go of identity is exactly that. It's floating. It's letting the past dissolve into the silence it came from. It's realizing that your scars are part of your story, but they're not the whole book. They're not the title. They're not the author. and they don't get to dictate what comes next. So ask yourself now, gently, without pressure, who would I be if I no longer identified with what happened? Who would I be if I didn't need my pain to justify my boundaries? What if I was allowed to be light? What if I was allowed to live without the constant burden of explaining myself to myself? What if I was allowed to change? Not just slowly, but instantly, right now. Because you are. You always have been. The past has no authority here. Only you do. You can't just let go of the past by not thinking about it. That never works. If you've ever tried to just stop dwelling on something, you know exactly what happens. You stop thinking about it for a while, and then it comes back, louder, heavier, hungrier. It slips in through the cracks when your guard is down, when you're tired, triggered, lonely, uncertain. Because letting go isn't just about absence, it's about replacement. Energy needs somewhere to go. The mind needs something to focus on. If you don't give it a future to move toward, it will pull you back into what's familiar. And what's familiar, for most people, is pain. Alan Watts talked about this in his own way. He said, problems that remain persistently insoluble should always be suspected as questions asked in the wrong way. And here's how most of us ask the question. How do I stop thinking about what hurt me? But that's not the right question. A better question is, what am I building that's so compelling? The past no longer deserves my energy. You don't escape your past by fighting it. You escape it by becoming someone your past has no authority over. Let that land. You escape the past by living a life it no longer fits inside. So let's start there. What are you moving toward? Not some vague idea of healing or closure, but something specific, a future you want to create, a version of you that feels expansive, empowered, even a little scary in its unfamiliarity. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Who are you when you're not chasing validation or reacting to trauma? What kind of work are you doing? What kind of people are you surrounding yourself with? What does your body feel like in that future? What kinds of thoughts come naturally? You can't just release the past. You have to replace it with something that resonates more deeply than the story you've been telling. Otherwise, the mind will go back to what it knows. Because what it knows, even if it hurts, feels safe. Safe is predictable. And predictable feels like control. But you don't need to control anymore. You need to create. Letting go is a creative act. It's not passive. It's not waiting for the memory to fade on its own. It's choosing to build something more interesting than your pain. Pain gets boring after a while. It's repetitive, predictable, circular. What's unfamiliar is freedom, expansion, possibility. Most people never walk through the door of freedom because they're afraid of losing who they were. But what if that's the point? What if letting go isn't something you do, but something that happens naturally, as a byproduct of becoming someone new, a future you that doesn't need the past to make sense of who you are? Think of it like this. Imagine you're holding onto an old key. You've carried it for years. It used to unlock something, a relationship, an identity, a role, a wound you used to protect. But you're in a new city now. You live in a different home. You walk through different doors. That key doesn't work anymore. You could keep it, hold it, polish it, talk about what it used to open. But it no longer gets you anywhere. At some point, the smart thing, the kind thing, is to leave it behind. Because holding the wrong key makes it harder to reach for the right one. That's how energy works. What you carry determines what you have room for. If your hands are full of yesterday, you won't have space for what's trying to find you today. So instead of asking, how do I let go? Ask, what am I filling my life with that's so alive, the past has nowhere to return to? And it doesn't have to be something huge. Start small. Start specific. Something you want to learn. A project that excites you. A community that supports you. A way of speaking to yourself that feels loving and unfamiliar. A boundary that feels bold and clean. A version of yourself that no longer performs for ghosts. This is how you truly move forward, not by force, but by fascination. By building a life so vibrant, your old self has no role in it anymore. Alan Watts called this the great dance. You don't get stuck in your head about the steps, you hear the music. You follow what moves you. You let life shape you, not your history. And when you do that, when you stop organizing your world around fear and start moving with freedom, the past doesn't need to be let go of. It just falls away, because it no longer fits the rhythm of who you've become. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more content on self-discovery.